Hello, this is Mike Van Meter. Welcome to the Recovery is Possible Hope and Healing with Mike and Lillie podcast. We want to thank you for joining us. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support for those suffering from addiction. Hey everybody, this is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible with Mike and Lillie podcast. And this is a special night because this is our first edition of the YouTube channel. So we are really excited to have you here tonight, and we're going to be talking about all things addiction. And I want to welcome Lillie tonight to the show.
Hey,
Hi, Lillie.
Everyone. Good to be here. Thanks,
And
Mike.
what I'm going to do is I want to kick off our edition with this. With a topic that I've been thinking about lately, and that is whether or not recovery is possible. After all, that's the name of this podcast. But what was making me think about that this week was I had a couple of patients that are addicted to fentanyl, and they both were telling me that they think that getting into recovery is absolutely impossible. And the discussion I had with them made me think of another YouTube video that I was watching with two Navy SEALs that were talking about their BUDS training. And if you're not familiar with BUDS training, that's Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL training, and it's notoriously difficult. And when I say notoriously difficult, it is training where upwards of 250 people will start in a class, and they may graduate 10, 12. In fact, they actually, throughout history, have had classes that graduated 0 people, okay? But it is difficult, but it's not impossible. And that was the theme of this video that I saw. And I want to get Lillie's input on this as well, but I want to share with you sort of the basic concept that was in this video because I think it has direct application to recovery. Now, just to give you a little background, the way that this works, if you go to SEAL training, if you enlist in the Navy and you get a SEAL contract, meaning that you go to basic training and they guarantee that you will have a shot at going through SEAL training. Doesn't mean that you'll become a SEAL. It means you have a shot at the training. You go to Great Lakes, Illinois, you go through basic boot camp, but while you're there, they put you through a workup process, a conditioning process. Condition you up to a certain point, then you go down to San Diego, and then you do another workup process. Then you start SEAL training, and they still wash out about 95% of the people that go. I mean, it's pretty tough training. But before you go down to San Diego, there's usually a SEAL that has been helping you train while you're in Great Lakes, and they give a speech. And in the speech, they tell you that what you are about to do is difficult, but it's not impossible. It's difficult, but not impossible. And this instructor gives advice on how to look through or get through the training, because a lot of the training is in your mind. Everybody that goes to SEAL training, because they go through screening and they go through this very long workup process, the fact is that physically any one of the people that goes down to BUDS training can graduate. But why don't they? Because it's the mental part. And oftentimes, the person that the people that graduate from BUDS training are not the people that you think are going to graduate when you start out. Oftentimes, the people that you think are going to graduate, in fact, don't. And here's what the instructor says to the students before they go down there. You have to look at the training as little increments. And what I mean by that is SEAL training in its totality is probably about 1.5 years long. It is a daily beatdown. You are absolutely just beaten down every single day for about 1.5 years. And if you look at that 1.5 years in your mind, if that's what you're thinking about, you're probably not going to make it because you just think there's just no way day after day after day that my body is going to be broken down like this and I can make it through a year and a half. And if you're in recovery, you may be thinking, there's no way I can not drink or drug again in my life. It's just too overwhelming. In fact, a year, 5 years, 10 years, certainly 30 years, you think that that's overwhelming. But what the SEAL instructor said to the students is, when you get down there, you have to have the mindset. Number one, you have to understand that you're going to want to quit. Just like an addiction, you're going to want to quit. But you have to say, all right, I understand I'm going to want to quit, but I'm not going to make the decision to quit right now. I'm going to reserve the right and delay the decision to tomorrow. If I'm going to quit, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm not going to do it today. And then you have to break your day when you're suffering into increments. Now, in SEAL training, what happens is you get the weekends off and the meal times are set: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and bedtime. Those are hard and fast. They do not change, with the exception of Hell Week, which they go through the entire week. But everything else is set. And those meals last 1 hour. And the instructors do not mess with you during that hour. Now, you get up at about 4 in the morning and you begin the physical training, and they beat the heck out of you. And your mindset has to be, I'm going to get through this and I'm going to make it to breakfast. Then I'm going to have an hour to fuel, get my act together. Then the training goes again until lunchtime. Then I have an hour. And then I have until dinner time. And then I have an hour. And then it's bedtime. And what he suggested is that the students only focus on making it to breakfast, making it to lunch. And ask yourself, when you're going through the training, do I think I can just make it to breakfast? That's your only goal. You're not even thinking about the rest of the day. You're just thinking about that, getting to breakfast, and then getting to lunch, and then getting to dinner. Well, in recovery, it's the same way. If you think of a lifelong journey of not using, your brain just gets overwhelmed with that. But if you can break your day down into those increments, and particularly in the beginning part of recovery, where that physiological pull is so strong because your body hasn't healed, the neural pathways haven't healed, vitamins, minerals have been stripped from your body. There's a lot of repair that has to be done, and those early days are tough. I've always said that the 30-day chip, that 30-day celebration of recovery, is the toughest. I still say that to this day. 13 years was easy compared to that first month. But in that first year, maybe even that first month, you will have to break your day down to, maybe I'm just not going to drink or drug before breakfast. Maybe I'm not going to do this before 10 o'clock, before noon. My goal is to get to bed without using. And I'll tell you, people in long-term recovery, that's how they look at their life. Can I just make it to bed tonight? Just make it today without drinking or drugging. In the traditional 12-step programs, that's why everything centers on that 24-hour day. If you ask people in long-term recovery, how much time sober do you have? Oftentimes the answer you're going to get is, I have 24 hours, because that's how they look at it. Now, it just so happens that they've put together 30 years of 24 hours. But that mindset never changes. And I will tell you, if you go watch videos of people that have been through not just SEAL training, but any sort of elite special forces training, when they were going through the selection process and the training process, every single one of them says that they look at it that way. They looked at their training that way. In fact, I will tell you that I have interviewed many ultra runners, and by ultra runner, I mean people that have run beyond marathons, 50-mile races, 100-mile races, 200-mile races. They say the same thing. They don't think about running 100 miles. What they do is they think about running from here to the next aid station. Then you get to that aid station and you get to the next tree line. You get to the next parking lot. You get to where they're serving lunch. You ask yourself, hey, look, can I just run 3 miles right now? Yeah, I can run 3 miles. Then they do the 3 miles, they take a break. But they do that over and over and over, and then before you know it, they get to 100 miles. We've actually interviewed people on this particular podcast that have done that, and that's exactly what they said. So I think that that's interesting because remember what the SEAL instructor said. What we're going to ask you to do is hard, but it is not impossible. It's a mindset. So that's what I wanted to throw out today. That's the message that I wanted to put out to you. But with that, Lillie, you just heard me talking about this. So give me sort of your thoughts. I mean, you've been around Al-Anon, you've been around people in recovery, you're around people that keep relapsing. We both are. What do you think of the concept that I just described?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that we find things, especially because we're in the midst of recovery, that things that you see that are not typically aligned with the disease of addiction, there's so many things that apply. And so I know that, like in my own circles, especially being in Al-Anon, which definitely applies, is the idea of, like you say, the 24-hour chip. So we don't give 24-hour chips typically in Al-Anon, but certainly we have our ODAT, the one day at a time. And so in that respect, when family members are living with someone who's in the throes of their addiction, the family members suffer. And so they're going through, wow, am I going to stay in this marriage? We actually say in Al-Anon that once you start coming, try not to make any major decisions for the first 6 months. Because, well, unfortunately, by the time they come to us, either they're already separated or they could be already divorced. But sometimes they're actually still with their loved one. And so the idea being is, hey, learn about the program. Don't make any drastic changes. And, hey, we've got this wonderful devotion that you can listen to that has these daily talks by people who've been in the program that just for one day, right? Just see if you could hang on for one day. Now, of course, if safety is an issue, get out of that situation. But if you're choosing to remain in that relationship, barring that that's not occurring, is just try to be gentle with yourself, have grace upon yourself, and then just take it one day at a time.
And focus on the task at hand. And that's the other thing that was mentioned in this podcast that I was watching with Special Forces is don't get out ahead of yourself. And I think that applies to not only the person in recovery, but the support person, the Al-Anon person, is don't get ahead of yourself. Concentrate on where you're standing. Wherever your feet are, that's where you are. You hear that a lot in recovery circles. Wherever your feet are and whatever is in front of you, focus on that. The other issues are going to come up. You're going to have other tasks. You're going to have other things to do. You might have something that you're looking forward to, but focus on what you're doing right now. And, one of the things that really gets to people and is difficult because early recovery is just difficult because we talked about your body, your brain is healing, but a lot of times you have family issues going on. You mentioned the family members and maybe you're looking at a divorce, you're looking at a separation, maybe the kids have been taken away from you, maybe you've gotten a DUI or arrest, or maybe you're facing jail time due to things that you did while you were drinking or drugging. And you're thinking, Mike, you're asking me to concentrate on today, but I have all these big issues coming up. I mean, shoot, I might have to go to jail down the road. I understand that, but deal with that when it comes. That's where the one day at a time concept comes into play. Wherever you are, just stick with that. And try not to do what we call catastrophizing. Catastrophizing means that you're looking out into the future and you already have this notion that there's going to be disaster on the horizon. The fact is, over 90% of the things that you think are going to happen, bad things that are going to happen to you, actually don't happen, or at least don't happen the way that you think that they're going to happen. And if you think back on your own life, you probably see there's a lot of truth to that. How many times have you thought about, like, I'm going to go into work on Monday morning and there's this disaster with my boss that's going to happen, or I'm going to have conflict with a coworker, and then you go in and it actually doesn't turn out the way that you thought it was going to be. And usually it's not near as bad as you thought it was going to be. So try to focus on where you are in the moment, the task, and really break your day and your life into those little segments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was just thinking about, the times where you were in the throes of your addiction, like when you weren't actively working on your recovery, that's when I was the most frustrated.
Sure.
But it was when you were in treatment and when I knew as your family member that you were at least trying, despite all the stuff that might be happening. Actually, as a family member, at least for me, I was encouraged when you were at least trying. It's when you weren't trying, when you were giving into it, that I was growing frustrated because I knew that I couldn't help you.
Yeah.
But as long as you kept trying, then I felt willing, to support you because I knew I couldn't do it for you. You're the only one that, it's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. Well, if you're my horse, as long as I know that you're attempting to drink water, then as a family member, I'm encouraged.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up because one other key element to this, and it was something that was mentioned in the video that I was talking about, that applies to Special Forces training, but also applies to recovery, is this. You just said, as long as I was trying. I'm going to say this right now, and I don't know how there's any other way to put it, that if you want to be in recovery, if you want long-term sobriety, you have to make a decision to be in sobriety. So what Lillie is talking about, there was a certain point in my life where I made the decision that I wanted to get sober, and I was willing to do anything that I needed to do to get sober. You can't be partially in and partially out. You can't say, well, I'm going to give this a shot. That's not the way it's going to work. In the video I was talking about, there was something that these guys said, and it seems kind of silly. It seems kind of extreme in the beginning, but it makes sense when you think about it. One of the guys said that he graduated obviously from SEAL training because he became a Navy SEAL. But what he did was he kind of created a condition in his life where there was no other option but to graduate from SEAL training. And I'll just kind of describe what this guy did and then bring it back to recovery. What he said was, at the time, he lived in Georgia, and at the time, he had a girlfriend. He got rid of the girlfriend because he thought, well, I'm going to be so devoted to this training, I'm not going to have time for her anyway. The relationship's not going to work out, so I'm not going to have the girlfriend. He sold all of his possessions, furniture, his car even, because he figured, hey, look, if I quit SEAL training and if I have a car in the parking lot, then I have an ability to leave the SEAL training. So I'll just sell my car. He had no worldly possessions. He stayed in the barracks. He didn't have an apartment. In other words, he had nowhere to go except through graduation and on through the SEAL training and then wherever the Navy was going to send him after that. This resonated with me because recovery is kind of the same way. There has to be no other option. You have to make the decision that you're going in this direction and you're going to get sober. But if you have in your mind that there's an option that I can go back, if it's too painful, I can go back. If I'm too uncomfortable, I can go back. If I don't like this lifestyle, I can go back. But just like that guy that went to SEAL training, you have to cut the ties with your past and decide this is the direction I'm going to go, and there is no other alternative. And have in your mind that no matter what happens in your life, death, loss of a job, loss of a marriage, alienation from your children, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever that is, I have a lot of options, but drinking and drugging is no longer that option. And that's what this guy in SEAL training did. He just cut off all options other than graduation. That's commitment. And anybody that's in long-term recovery made that same sort of commitment. You just have both feet in. You're not looking back. We're not looking in the rearview mirror, and it's all forward. And I know you understand that, and you saw that in my life, didn't you, Lillie? There was a point where I was just all in. Prior to that, I was kind of putting my foot.
Yeah, you were
I was
dabbling.
kind of dipping my foot in
Right.
the deep end, and it was the water cold.
What is the saying, Mike? It says when the pain to stay sober is so bad, that's where people hit their bottoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're willing to jump in with both feet into recovery. But there are individuals who die from this disease.
Sure.
And to me, it's not amazing in a bad way that the disease just so overcomes them that their pain tolerance is astronomically high, that they face death and they don't get out of it.
Yeah, and a lot of that is stubbornness, I think.
But I mean, is it stubbornness or can the addiction be so horrible and so horrendous that it takes away the willpower?
Well, interesting question. Addiction is a disease of the mind and the body, and that's important to understand. It's a form of mental illness, to be honest with you. It's very unnatural. You killing yourself is an unnatural act. And if you think about drinking and drugging the way that we're talking about it, it's a form of suicide, and it's an unnatural act. So why do we engage in it? Why do we continue to engage in those things that we know are killing us? And, most people that are drinking alcoholically or using drugs addictively know. I mean, you know in the back of your mind that this is killing you. So the question is, so then why do you continue to do it? That's the mind part of it. Mind and body, mind and body. And this is the only addiction that we know of that tells you that you don't have it. And even when you're forced to admit that you do have it, you will downplay how bad it is. That's why we use terms like functional alcoholic. You've heard this, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a functional alcoholic. What do you mean by functional alcoholic? I use recreational drugs. It helps me think. It helps me do better. I had a patient say that to me the other day. He goes, marijuana helps me think better. And I go, no, it doesn't. He goes, no, it does. And he says, I beg to disagree with you. And I said, I don't care if you disagree with me or not. There's nothing about marijuana that makes your life better or think better. And I gave him the example. I said, let's say you get onto the airport right now and you decide you're going to, fly somewhere. And you got on the airplane and you looked up and you saw the pilots up there and you're like, hey, I hope you guys are Navy pilots because Navy pilots are better than other pilots. Right on, and then they hit the bong pipe and they start smoking marijuana. Are you staying on that plane? And he looked at me and, initially he said, yeah, because I think he wanted to be argumentative. He said, yeah, I would. I said, damn well you wouldn't stay on that because of all the other patients obviously were going, are you kidding me? The Uber driver, if the Uber driver is up there smoking on a bong pipe, are you putting your kids in that Uber? And the answer to that obviously is no. Okay. But what's going on there? What's going on is this guy's brain is trying to justify the use. This is a disease that protects itself. It's the only disease that we know of that does that. It protects itself. And so when we tell people that we're a functional alcoholic, that's our brain wanting to continue the use. Because the fact is, there's nothing functional about your life. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, I still have a job. Okay, well, that's not functional. Okay, but what about your relationship with your significant other? What about your relationship with your kids if you have kids? Are you still doing your hobbies? Are you enjoying things? Are you going out? Do you have a life? How's your sex life? How are all of these things? And the answer to that is it sucks. It absolutely sucks. Because if a guy comes and he tells me that he's a functional alcoholic, and I always ask him, well, if I brought your wife and kids in here and I asked them, what would they say? Would they agree with you? And the answer is always no. Okay, well, so it's not functional, is it? And oh, by the way, this business about your job, I bet you if I talked to your employer, they'd have problems with your drinking. The fact that they have not fired you yet doesn't mean that they don't have a problem with you, okay? Mm-hmm. And you're also not functioning at the capacity that you can. Everybody that I know of that has gotten into long-term recovery says that they're, assuming they did not already get fired from their jobs, in that same job, they said that they were enormously more productive than when they were drinking. Because if you come into work every day and you're hungover, you're probably not even functional until about noon, and then we might get 2 or 3 decent hours out of you, and then you go home and you start all over again. Does that make sense?
That's absolutely.
Yeah. So mind and body, that's really what it comes down to. And I think the people that you were talking about that never get it and die, that there has to be a point where the reasoning, the education, the willpower on your part sort of overrides the power of the brain, justifying your continued use. And there's a certain element of stubbornness. There's a unwillingness. There's this, after all, how many patients come into the hospital and they will debate me? They will argue with me about what we're doing. I mean, they're on their 60th treatment episode and they're debating me over the wisdom of abstinence, right? That a lot of that is just stubbornness. And I think they want to fight. It's that sort of like, I'm going to willpower my way through this, and I'm going to, I'm strong. You don't understand, Mike. I am strong. You may be strong. You may have enormous willpower in every other aspect of your life. But when it comes to this area, your willpower means nothing. You experienced that in my particular case, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I used to tell you all the time. I'm like, wow, you're so good in all the other areas of your life about being able to have control over it, right? And then, of course, you would always say, well, I could stop whenever I want. I'm like, well, okay, then stop. And then when you started...
I don't want to.
Right. Well, but I mean, that's not what you would say to me. But then you would say, well, I could stop if I wanted to. And then it was only when you started sincerely trying to stop, you realized that you couldn't on your own. You need medical intervention.
Yeah. And for those of you that are in professions where willpower is important, meaning you are in the military, you're a pilot, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you're some first responder. There's a lot of jobs out there that require a lot of willpower. And you're thinking that you can willpower your way through this. The answer to that is that you cannot. And when you come into recovery, it's really this paradigm shift. You have to really shift your traditional thinking because, on one hand, you think willpower is a good thing, and it is a good thing. I mean, after all, if you're a pilot, right, and you want a confident pilot, you want somebody that when you're flying and if there's a fire light that comes on or some sort of emergency, you want somebody that is confident enough in their training and their ability to be able to get you back onto the ground safely. I mean, after all, you wouldn't want a pilot that had no self-confidence because when they face an emergency, that's not a good thing, is it? How about a military officer or an infantryman in combat or a police officer or a fireman? You have to have confidence to do those jobs. Those are good things. Problem is if you're an addict and you're in that category where your entire career, your entire life was based around your confidence, when it comes to addiction, that's a very bad thing because no amount of willpower is going to overcome addiction. It's just not. There's just some things physiologically, and in future podcasts, we'll talk about some of the physiology, which will explain scientifically what I'm talking about. But there are parasympathetic processes that go on in your body that you have absolutely no control over. I mean, for example, I'll give you one example. If you have diarrhea, right? Lillie, you have a lot of self-confidence, right? You have a lot of self-confidence. But if you have diarrhea, how much willpower, do you have enough willpower to say, I'm going to stop this diarrhea?
No.
Absolutely not, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if you're a boxer, a UFC fighter, a fighter pilot. If you have diarrhea, you have diarrhea. And no amount of willpower is fixing that. Mm-hmm. When you got to go, you got to go. Addiction's kind of the same way. When that urge comes to drink or drug, it is overwhelming. So how do you beat it? Here's the one thing that we can do when it comes to addiction is we just stop fighting it. And what I mean by that, because there is a difference between addiction and diarrhea, and that is that with addiction, how we don't fight it is by not engaging it. If I get into a boxing ring with a professional boxer and he beats me up, there's no amount of training that Mike is going to do to beat George Foreman, Mike Tyson, fill in the blank. Not going to happen. I could have the same coach. I could have the same training. I can hydrate. I can sleep. I can take supplements. In fact, I could take steroids and dope. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Mike Tyson's Mike Tyson, and I'm not. And I'm going to get beaten up every time. So how do I not get beaten up by Mike Tyson? I don't get into the ring with Mike Tyson. Mm-hmm. That's how I don't get beaten up by Mike Tyson. And that's how it is with addiction. Alcohol beat me up every time I used. So the way that I don't get beaten up by alcohol or drugs, if that's your story, I don't get into the ring with alcohol. That's the difference. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point.
Mm-hmm. So, Lillie, take us out. Give us some thoughts. You know, like as I'm talking about this tonight, what are some key takeaway points that you have, or some things that you just want to highlight for the listeners tonight?
So I would say, I mean, number one, I love the analogy, right? It really helps to, I mean, especially if you're in the military, you understand, what the BUDS program is, but just to highlight that mental mindset between the two programs, I think that's really good, Michael, to be able to tie the difference or the similarities between the two. That's really what I like that you're able to do, is to take concepts that you may not necessarily align them with one another, but then when you're able to pull those similarities, and the storytelling, of course, it really brings to life how recovery truly is possible. So that was very, very helpful. And then I think that your message not only is applicable to the person who's the addict, right, but it's also applicable to the family members who are also trying to support their loved one, because they too can hit bottom, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And they too get very frustrated. And their support, just like their support for the addict, there's also lots of support for the family members as well. And maybe you've been doing, because what do we say in Al-Anon? We didn't cause it. We can't cure it. We can't control it, but we can contribute to it. So the things that, that we're learning in this program, and then, what Mike and I are talking about in Al-Anon, there are a lot of things that we may not know, unbeknownst to us, only because it's just reactive on our part. But there are programs out there that teach you how to not contribute or not to enable the behavior of the loved one that you want to go into recovery. So I think things that hopefully, things that we're talking about here can be of assistance and help to those, to encourage them that recovery is truly possible.
It is. It absolutely is possible. And if you're listening here tonight to what we're talking about, I want you to remember this key aspect of everything that we're talking about here tonight. It's all going to start with the decision that we talked about. The decision to get well, and the decision to just go all in. I've been skydiving before, right? And those of you that have been skydiving before, you can relate to this. When you're sitting there at the door of the airplane, and you're right there, and you have to make a decision. I'm going to go, or I'm not. And that's kind of where we are with addiction and recovery. You got to make that decision to go or not. You can't be like halfway out, halfway in. You can't jump out of the airplane and go, oh I'm sorry. Wait, I really don't want to do this. Once you make that plunge, that's it. You're all in. Once you depart that aircraft, you are, whatever you're thinking, you're all in. And then the goal is to make it onto the ground. And that's kind of what recovery is all about. You make that decision, you push yourself out the door, and that's the way that it is. Now, everything that we're saying right now is a suggestion. Nothing we're talking about is a requirement. But I want to point this out to you, that when you jump out of that airplane and you start plummeting towards the ground, it's only a suggestion that you have a parachute on. But I would really suggest that you put a parachute on, or it's not going to end well. And that parachute is going to be getting into a program of recovery. I want you to remember that almost no one that is not in a program of recovery stays in long-term recovery. So keep that in mind. And we'll talk about that more. We're going to unpack a lot of this as we go on in this YouTube channel And again, I want to thank each and every one of you tonight for listening to us. This is the first YouTube episode of Recovery is Possible with Mike and Lillie. Now, we've been doing the podcast for quite some time. You can get it on any of the podcast outlets out there. Just go in there, check out Recovery is Possible with Mike and Lillie. And we have a lot of episodes, a lot of interviews, a lot of information. So if you've got something out of this episode tonight, remember you can go back to the podcast episodes, and there's a lot of material out there for you that will assist you in recovery, assist your loved ones in recovery. And we are so glad that you've joined us here tonight, and you've joined this Recovery is Possible community and this family, because we do think of all of you as family. And it is our sincere hope that if you're struggling, that you will get well, that something that you've heard here tonight or in the other episodes will help you, will help your loved ones. Please spread the message. Send this to people that you feel need this, that could benefit from it, because that's our goal. We want you to live a happy, joyous, and free life, because it is possible. Thanks. And Lillie, some final departing words?
Yeah, what I wanted to say is we're doing a YouTube version, but you're going to go ahead and continue with the all audio one.
Yep.
And we'll just make sure that we capture the video portion on YouTube.
Yeah. Thank you all so very much, and we'll be talking with you soon. God bless and take care. So as I always like to say, I do not represent any group, do not represent anyone other than myself. My only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what I've done, because it's helped me and maybe it will help you too. If I've said something that does not apply to you or you don't agree with, then just discard it. But try to take any information that you can use for yourself and help others as well. That's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and we hope to impart the knowledge we have gained to others as well. With that, please visit our Facebook page, Recovery is Possible, and our website, VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let us know how we're doing, and let us know if there's any topic that you're interested in hearing about. We'd love to hear from you, and take care, and we'll see you next time.